In this third part of Set Apart, we're talking about being a community of peace in a world that's filled with anxiety, with unrest, with division. And so I'm so excited that our spiritual practice today is something, Becky, that you're really passionate about. Mm-hmm. Becky Fitch is here, and I want to talk about the spiritual practice of solitude and silence. Mm-hmm. Talk about that. I'm a Type A personality. I try to go, and I've never stopped my mouth from running, and I'm extrovert.
It's like your worst nightmare.
Silence and solitude sounds scary.
Yeah.
Or it just, yeah.
Well, I think, growing up in the church, silence and solitude, I often most thought of it as like times of extreme like isolation, right? Where you go by yourself to the wilderness or some
which we just did.
Mountain
we just went through
or whatever.
COVID.
Right?
We're all isolated already.
And
so wait, you want us to do more of that?
Right? And I think it is pretty unappealing for a lot of people. And maybe some introverts are like, yeah, I'd like it for a little bit of time. But I think the key with silence and solitude, it's not so much about being isolated, right? Or being quiet, as it is about creating space for your soul to connect with God. And because there's lots of times when we're by ourselves, right? But that's not solitude. Or there's lots of times when we're not talking, but that's not silence. And so it's this intentional practice of creating that space for your soul to connect with God. And that's something
hold on.
that...
Can you repeat that? Creating a space
for your soul to connect with God.
That's good.
And it has to be this intentional practice, because the reality is we live in a world, yes, we just came out of COVID, right? And quarantine and isolation. But the reality is our world is filled with so much noise, right? We constantly, more than any other time in human history, are bombarded with noise. And I'm not just talking about me who have like little children and literally the noise level in my house is loud constantly. But
and Garrett, your husband's
and
very
Garrett,
loud,
yes.
Loud man.
But the noise from the demands of the people around me at work, at home, at church, in my community, the noise from my phone that's constantly with me and I constantly have access to social media or text messages or emails, or right? There's just so much information and noise that's constantly bombarding us.
Which starts right before we wake up even. Like we wake up in the morning and I want to see what time it is.
I mean, the first thing I do the first thing I do, I have my alarm set usually on my watch. So the first thing I do is snooze it once and sleep 9 more minutes. And then the second thing I do, right?
That's your peace. That's your solitude and silence right there, 9 minutes.
And then the second thing I do is take my phone with me as I go to the bathroom and start getting ready. And I'm looking at, what text messages came in, or opening up my email, or making sure I play Quirtle, right? Like Wordle and Quirtle. I play Quirtle too. It's 4. Anyways, it's good. I play Wordle and Quirtle.
Good for you.
As if there isn't enough noise, right?
There's so much in that.
Now we have to do that, and you can't let your streak die.
No, you have to keep going.
And so I think that for me, silence and solitude has been such a necessary practice because it gives my soul that space to breathe a little bit. And
you mentioned just now your very busy life. You've got a demanding job as well. Mm-hmm. You've got friends, family all around you. Mm-hmm. So where do you find this time, not to be alone, but to actually have solitude? And where do you find places where it's quiet enough to also have that?
Yeah, I think for me it shifted when I stopped thinking about silence and solitude as only happening in these like day-long or weekend-long retreats of isolation, right? Because that was just not realistic for my time, my season of life. For me to let me get away to a cabin by myself for a weekend, no, like that just can't happen.
That's once a year, maybe.
Maybe, right? Like, and instead looked at it as what are the moments, the pockets in my day. And so for me, the first 30 minutes I'm awake, and my last 30 minutes before I go to bed, and asking myself, what am I doing in those times? How am I taking advantage of those times? Am I allowing those times to just fill my mind with more noise, or am I creating space for my soul to connect with God during those times? And then throughout my day, I'm the type of person who I'm early if I'm on time, and I'm on time if I'm late.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm usually just going from one thing to the next, and I'm always kind of running a few minutes behind. And so building into my time, my schedule, moments to have some gap of nothingness, right? And arrive to work early. And instead of rushing inside to check emails before my first meeting, right? Spend a few minutes and shut off my engine and shut off my phone and just sit there and allow my soul that space to rest in God's presence before I enter into, right, that work environment or enter into my home or enter into whatever it may be. And so that's been super helpful for me. And then I think the most impactful one has been when I'm driving alone in the car, which never happens.
Right.
Because I work in Livermore and I live in Livermore, my kids go to school in Livermore, I go to church in Livermore, everything happens in Livermore. There was like a period of time this spring where I was like, I don't think I've left Livermore in over a month. Like literally haven't driven out of Livermore, which is sad. Is that sad? That's
I don't know.
Sad. Sorry, feel bad for me. No, I'm just kidding. But when I am driving, I usually have kids too. So I never am alone in the car. But the last 2 months I've been playing in an outdoor soccer league in Orinda, which is so far away from Livermore for someone who never leaves Livermore.
Right.
And at first that was like a deterrent to not even be a part of the league. But then I just realized, well, at the very least, I'm gonna have alone time for 40 minutes there and 40 minutes back, right in the car. And that's been such like a haven for me in the last couple of months. That drive. I love soccer and the game, and having that like competition back in my life has been awesome. But the drive has been really impactful for me because it's giving me space to sit in silence and I'm still doing something, right? I don't like sitting still doing nothing.
Right.
So I'm still driving, but I'm not filling that time automatically with this podcast or this thing or that thing, right? I'm creating, and maybe I'll get there, but I'm creating space to just have quiet music on or instrumental music or silence even, and allow that space for my soul to rest and connect with God in a way that it just can't when there's constant noise.
What a great tip. And this spiritual practice is definitely something we will need to practice because it doesn't just come to you. You have to create space for your soul to connect with God. I love that. Wish we could talk longer, but apparently you have to go. You've got a really busy schedule. Hey, but listen, share with us what your tips are. What has worked for you to create that space for your soul to connect with God? Or maybe you're trying this for the first time and you download an app or something like that that has that, that creates that space for you. Or maybe there's special places in your house or around your space where you've been able to do that. And let's share that with one another in your group, or just using the various chat and comment sections to do that. And actually, let's start that right now. You've got nothing going on. You have an excuse because you're at church or you're watching this video right now, and you have time right now to stop everything and just use this space for your soul to connect with God.